This is F.D. Recovery, where we interview addicts and alcoholics.
Our aim is that through this podcast, we might help you on your journey of recovery.
Thank you for listening. Hello, this is Frank with F.D. Recovery. This is the Weekly Intention. For those of you that do not know what the Weekly Intention is, basically, I go week to week. Sometimes I'll have people on here with me, but today I'll be doing it alone. We choose topics, spiritual principles, so on and so forth. So this week we're going to choose resilience. But before we dive into that and get all spiritual and knowledgeable and wisdomal, and that's not a word, but I just made it up. Before we start diving into that, we will recap last week's, which was hope. It was a good topic. When I brought it up at one of my meetings, a couple of them, right? And it was a good topic, right? I also did some Facebook content on it, just kind of a recap and working it in my life. And I like doing this because it keeps me current and attached to these spiritual principles, right? And so hope, right? I explained last time about the whole using it to get high off of almost, right? I've done that a ton in my recovery, right? And, just to be weary and all that. But one thing that I uncovered on this whole hope thing, right? Because I started off and I was kind of beefing with it, right? And let's be completely honest. I've chopped perspectives up with my buddies, and I'm not talking about lines. I'm talking about actual perspectives. I know when you hear chopped, you get pretty triggered for some of the cokeheads out there. So I do apologize. And if you're not a cokehead, then I do apologize. So long story short, with this whole chopping up of perception and perspective, right? Being able to share back and forth and getting some knowledge about what other people think and what you think about it, right? It's super important. And the thing that kept popping up is people kind of had some beef with it, right? And I'm like, oh, okay. And we were going back and forth, especially at this meeting we're at. And it's kind of an open forum. A lot of us alumni that graduated the rehab come back, shoot the shit, talk, and answer questions, right? And experience, strength, and hope, all that jazz, right? So a lot of people were like, man, it's all good, but hope only gets you so far, and you need action, and yeah, you can hope in one hand, kind of shit in the other, that type of vibe. And I totally get it, right? And I'm like, you know what? I'm beefing with hope. I realized that. I'm like, oh my gosh, there I go beefing with hope, right? And I totally understood what everyone was coming at. But I realized I was letting my ego control the narrative when it came to hope, right? I was getting to this point of, and I even dropped a video earlier, and it was kind of egocentric. So this development was in the last, we'll say 8 hours, right? Because that video was pretty early, and it's been about 7-8 hours later. So I realized that I was kind of biased towards hope. I'm a pull myself up by the bootstraps and yada yada, and right, and it takes a lot of wherewithal to get there. But I realized, it's for me, it was drenched in ego, and I'm like, oh, okay. So I'm beefing with hope because I want to feel like I'm in control, right? And I'm like, oh, okay. Because usually when I utilize hope, I'm in a state of grief, or because the reasons I would use hope in the past and why it had such a beef, I had such a beef with it, is because I would use it in real, like, damning moments, real dark moments, right, to get me out of it. I wasn't using it. I was using it as almost a savior feeling instead of like using it for what I use it with, uh, or what I'm gonna be using it with, right? Don't get me wrong, I still am using it, but I was kind of beefing with it there for a second. So, um, and which leads me to my point of, I still have the same perspective on it. Like it needs to be rooted in action and all that. But I realize that, there are times where the other side of that hope, when you don't see a way, it'll get you to that. And then I thought back, right? Because this was all, a lot of it was a conversation that kind of led me towards this. It's like I was beefing with hope, right? Um, and I realized, like, oh my gosh, I forgot where I came from, right? Meaning, I forgot about the first month I was in recovery, the first year I was in recovery month, all that stuff, right? I forgot how I had to cling on to hope because, um, and really faith too, because I had no knowledge. There was no, basically, I had no evidence to kind of show that this is going to work. And that takes a whole lot of faith, right? And all my evidence, right, which I didn't have any, all my towards like being sober, but I had all the evidence to show that I was going to relapse, that I wasn't really cut out for this whole sobriety thing. So I had more evidence leaning towards that way, and really a lot of things stacked up to me that I needed hope. I realized why I was beefing with it. I must have adopted this negative nuance behind it, right? I don't think that's the word. Maybe a negative connotation, like just where I, I was just looking at it wrong because every time I utilize hope, I was in a really dark place. And maybe subconsciously, I was making that connection in all the wrong way and not realizing that's the reason I'm here is, don't get me wrong, there's a lot of other reasons, but it was a big part of why I made it out of that darkness I was in. Because if I would have lost hope, right? If I would have came in with a week or two clean and sober and not willing to sit in that seat and listen, and then listen to those people and go, oh my God, if he can do it, I can do it. If she can do it, I can do it. And I forgot about that hope piece, right? So, you know, um, oftentimes, even this morning, and I do still stand on that fact, right? I used hope as this real whimsical thing, right? I thought, well, you need action, and it's just this whimsical and blah blah blah, right? And I didn't realize that I was beefing with it, and today, when you forget where you come from and you forget about the hard times, you forget how hope can really, really change and shape your mind, right? And it takes a lot of other things like following through and doing what you need to do, doing what you say you're going to do, showing up for commitments, all those things. But that hope that things can get better when things look really dark was the beginning stages, right? And then we were sharing back and forth at the rehab, and another light bulb went off for me. And because there I am, I want to live in my ego most of the time, and like, you got to pull yourself up by a bootstrap, blah blah blah. And then I realized, like, okay, well, there's gonna be a time, I get a phone call. My mom's gone, right? Passes away, God forbid. I'm gonna get a phone call about my dad. He's in the whatever, right? And I'm gonna seek out that hope when things are dim, right? And I'm like, oh, so I was making that connection with that negativity, and I was basing it all off negativity and only negativity, right? I and I also came to the conclusion, especially with this hope thing, that it's just not just to pull me out of the darkness. It's to cultivate a positive, an optimistic mindset about the future. And I believe that's important, right? And now I got the facts to back it up. So now my hope could even live stronger. I talked about the weight bench. I was standing by the weight bench and I said, you know what? You can't really get under this weight if you haven't went from point A and point B. You can't just expect yourself to lift heavy stuff. There's a beginning, there's a whole process to it. You can't just get under, 200 or 300 pounds and say, I hope I can lift it, especially with no spotter. Especially no spotter there, you're gonna have you, you got a lot of faith in yourself, right? Not be you wouldn't be that silly in such an extreme situation to put yourself in harm's way, but that also connects straight to all my situations, right? I was holding hope in all the wrong places back when I was using. Well, I hope I don't smoke dope as I'm sitting in a dope house, right? Oh, I hope I don't get high. And the place I'm walking to, well, the only place I was really welcome after jail was a dope house. So I had all these unrealistic hopes based off of no evidence and no plan. I hope I don't go to jail, right? And the only places that I really framed my life and framed my places of worship, if you call it, was the dope house, trap houses, and the streets, right? And so I realized that all my hope was rooted in the wrong thing, and I only used it in real negative situations, right? So I'm taking back the word, right? I'm gonna take it and reframe it. I'm gonna keep continuing to work it and hang on to hope that I hope one day I won't only use hope in negative situations, right? That was a big eye opener for me, and that's you guys got to witness it here live time. So I appreciate you guys being a part of this process and process of my recovery, right? Because that's what this all is. Um, so let's wrap up hope and move on to resilience. All right, let's see what almighty Google has to say. All right, resilience. All right, let's click that. Okay. Okay, resilience. You know, it was between strength and resilience, right? There's key differences in those, right? Because you would think you hear resilience and you just kind of assume it's strength. It is a form of strength, but a different type of strength. Okay. So, resilience is the ability to adopt or adapt. Let's start that over. Resilience, the ability to adapt, recover, and thrive in the face of adversity, stress, or trauma. It involves developing coping mechanisms and mental strength to navigate challenges and bounce back to one's original state, even grow stronger after experiencing difficult situations, right? So, the flexibility and adaptation that was important in this whole thing, right? So the ability to adjust to new circumstances and change when faced with setbacks, the flexibility. Because I was thinking, well, strength and resilience, they're the same thing. Because, I assume I know everything ahead of time, but I don't. And I seem to get proven wrong on a daily basis, which is very good because that means I'm learning, right? So if you're having trouble, which I did, so I'm going to assume you are. And if you didn't, then this part's not for you. And just fast forward through the next 5 seconds or however long it takes me to read. So, resilience is the ability to bounce back from misfortune or change, while strength is the capacity to withstand pressure without breaking. Strength is a kind of an endurance, whereas resilience is about flexibility and adaptation. All right. Think of a sturdy oak tree that resists a strong wind, strength, versus a flexible reed that bends but doesn't snap, reed. I don't know what the heck that is. What the hell? REED. F.D. I've never heard that before. I'm assuming it's some sort of branch, but there I go with my assumptions again, right? So the, read a tall, nope, I was totally wrong. A tall grass-like wet plant, plant or a thin, flexible piece of cane. Oh, cool. All right. Well, it can mean metal, cane, or metal use. Uh, okay, that's a couple different things there, but the the breakdown is right. Strength, the difference between strength and resilience, right? And truly, I think those should go together for sure, right? But we'll talk about strength for another time. But the resilience, and I didn't know the difference, right? Being able to be flexible. Imagine that, man. I was 100% rigid, all right? And I still can be. There's not like you come to recovery and then all of a sudden you're like, oh, I'm free flowing and everything's great. Well, that wasn't my experience and it still isn't. And I'm 7 years in the game with no drugs, no alcohol, only me, myself, and well, caffeine does count, I guess. Because I do drink a lot of caffeine. But we all have battles, right? So, resilience in recovery. Resilience refers to the ability to cope with and recover from adversity, setbacks, and challenges. In the context of recovery from addiction or mental health conditions, yeah, because that's one and the same for me. Yeah. I used to not think that having this addiction thing wasn't connected to mental health, right? Obviously, that's a very arguable point, and people can argue for and argue against, right? Some people say it's a choice, some people say it's not. But the people that are touched by this addiction, they've come to realize and they've accepted it. They realize it's much more than just a choice. As soon as I pick up as soon as the mental obsession comes along, the physical dependency, there's nothing that will stop me. There's no amount of love. There's no amount of children, CPS cases, no amount of time hanging over your head because of prison sentence. There's absolutely nothing that will stop you from getting your next fix. And most of you people, the drug and alcoholic portions of who's listening to this, know what the fuck I'm talking about. When I was using, I only had one mode of apparatus, and that was just to use and means get more, right? Yeah, we live to use and use to live. Very simply, that was the simple factor of it. There was nothing else that mattered, right? So in the context of recovery from addiction or mental health conditions, resilience is critical for maintaining sobriety, managing triggers, and achieving long-term sobriety. And it goes straight into prevent relapse, right? Relapse prevention. Resilience helps individuals resist craving, cope with triggers, and avoid relapsing. Well, yeah, right? Because if you're not, this is how I break it down in my mind. If you're not willing to change your perspective, change your beliefs, get to a point where you say, hey, I might be wrong, right? I might have this wrong. Everything, I went through so much of that in my life. I mean, I came to the conclusion just about, full bull. We're talking about death of ego, come to Jesus, all these magnificent things we talk about. It's like, oh my God, I came to this conclusion of like, I am full of shit. I didn't realize how much of my identity was fake, how much of my personality was fake, the characteristics that I thrived off, the charismatic nature that I thought I possessed. I realized how much of it was dependent on alcohol or drugs to be in my system, I didn't realize that I lack the confidence to do just about anything. And it was very scary when I first got clean and sober and actually tried to get clean and sober. None of this bullshit where I was smoking weed in the background or taking kratom or abusing Suboxone, all these roads that I took. Oh, I was on the methadone trip for a while. Well, I'm getting it prescribed, so it's all good. But the reality is, I was just using one coping mechanism over the next, the one drug over. I was bartering, switching, all that stuff we talk about. You know, so getting to this place where I realized I needed to be completely abstinence, right? I'm pretty sure that's how you pronounce that word. Let's check it, right? Abstinence, right? Complete abstinence is the practice of self enforced restraint from indulging in a bodily activity that are widely experienced as giving pleasure. Most frequently, the term refers to sexual abstinence. Well, continues to say, but it can also mean abstinence from alcohol, drug, food, or other comforts, right? So until I participated in, yep, until I completely off of everything, right? I Because, like I said, man, I was just one for another. And until I could completely embrace that and embrace this life of nothing in my system, until I can finally relinquish control, right? There was no way, for me to stay off drugs. That's just my experience. You can do whatever you want, man. I don't suggest you bump your head like I did 1,000 times, 5 different rehabs, a bunch of jail time, and eventually prison. you know you can you can probably rest assured that you're going to go down a tough path if you're going to be bartering and changing one drug for the next. Well, I can just do alcohol and blah blah blah. No, dude, you're gonna have a tough time, right? I've realized in my recovery, you know, you just got to shoot it straight when it comes to that shit. Just stay off of it, right? Because I've seen so many people just struggle, right? And tried to get to this place where they think they can do one thing or just smoke weed and, just beers on the weekends, but it never really works out that way. And many of my relapses started that way, and I know that you guys understand what I'm saying. But getting back to this resilience thing, right? I used to be so rigid with my everything, and being able to be flexible and admit when I'm wrong. That's an important thing, right? Dealing with you know, you know, going back to work issues or anything like that, recovery issues, whatever. I'm dealing with this stuff at work where I can't spare too many details, but nobody's even trying to walk up to the table and see like where they can do better. They're just finger pointing, right? And that's with a lot of stuff in life. People just finger point. They don't care about making the situation better. They just want to be wrong or right. And that's just a tough pill to swallow in a lot of situations. First off, it don't help anything, right? Pointing out other people's flaws constantly, this and this is where they're wrong, I'm right because of this, and this is where I shouldn't have blame. And it's like, it's such a hard way to exist, because there is a easier, softer way. And until you can fully step into this, right, your resilience is going to be crap, right? Because that means you're not flexible. You're not willing to see that you're wrong. There's no sense of resilience in that. If you can't see, okay, if you're going to walk through life, and these are hard pills I've had to swallow, right? I had to get to the point where I can try to, as fast as possible, admit when I'm wrong, see where I can do better. And it doesn't always come easy. It comes really tough. So I totally get it, right? But when you walk through life and you're in certain situation, whether it be work, relationship, friendships, and you can't admit when you're wrong, you're basically saying there's nothing to correct. So carry on, soldier, right? And then you push everybody away from you, and in the end, you alter the information to make yourself feel good and wonder, and then call them the asshole, them the bad guys, and not realizing you kind of did it to yourself the whole time. I met so many people that were very difficult, and I did it for so long, right? Until I can take accountability, right? Like that flexibility of being able to admit you're wrong is key part to resilience, right? Also, being resilient and being able to come back from trauma, the resilience, it's important, right? Because it says that even in the straight up definition, it says being able to bounce from trauma, bounce back from trauma, because that's important. Stress, faces of adversity, stress, or trauma, right? I mean, who on here could, I can't see you, but raise your hand if you've experienced trauma. I know I have, right? And I know anybody that probably walks this planet has in some form or not, right? Or next, right? But trauma is a tricky thing, right? Because there's a difference. There's a difference between pain and trauma. And I heard a real spiritual, I think it was Sadath Guru that said, we caused the trauma. And I was like, that's bullshit. I didn't do all that. And he says, no, no, no. And then he explains it, right? But my mind immediately said, what the fuck you talking about? No, I didn't do this to me, right? and he explained it a little deeper, and I'm probably will do him a disservice, but the way he explains it's real well, right? Is they caused the pain, right? We caused the trauma. And I had to think about that for a second. And essentially, the way he break it down and the way my mind interpreted it, it was the pain is unavoidable, right? But I chose the suffering behind it. I chose the attachment. I chose the wallowing in it. I chose to embody it, to make it part of my identity and live with it like it was a wart or growth on myself. and that made me rethink this whole thing, right? Because if all of a sudden it's no longer an appendage of you, right? And it's no longer this surgical removal that you would lose part of what you are, and you realize that you're carrying something that was never really you in the first place. I was like, holy shit. Right there, I am thinking it's a part of me. It has to be a part of my story. It's like a finger. I got a sixth finger, and it's just barely hanging on, and it's doing me no good. Right, it's causing me a lot of pain. Doctor says I need to get it removed. Blah blah blah. You get the picture, right? So I was walking around thinking this was a part of me. This is my identity. This is supposed to be with me. And I never realized that the pain that happened so long ago, I was carrying it forward to the present, to the now, to the forever, right? I was never going to let it go, and I'm going to continue holding it hostage, and in turn it holds me hostage, right? And in many ways I had to come to this conclusion. But when I heard it that way, it helped release it on a deeper level, right? Because we learn about trauma, releasing trauma, but to find out that it was myself causing the suffering for me, and that's a pretty deep level of thought. So if you're hearing this and you're in that, well, I was a victim and all this, that's true. That is true. If you went through something horrendous and it was done to you by another person, that is true. But it's also true that you have agency over your life today, and then you can choose to move forward. And how you choose to move forward is completely contingent off of the you now, not the 3-year-old you, not the 4-year-old you, the 12-year-old you, the 20-year-old you, where the act was done, whether it be violent, whether it be sexual abuse, whether it be physical abuse, it happened, right? But the truth about it, the agency, where you gain your agency back, is you have a choice. You can rewrite that narrative. The pain was done. You can't let go of that fact. You can't change it. But what you can change is the narrative. You can start to believe in something new and let go of all the lies, right? My buddy talks about that. It's all lies we're dealing with. Things we agreed to and we continue to agree to, right? And when that hit me, because I'm talking with some passion right now, because it hit me in such a passionful way, or what's a better word? It hit me with the burst of fear, excitement, and all these other feelings that I didn't quite know how to contain at the time. And I'm just, I'm thinking about this feedback loop and how I used to keep it so negative, and today it's just a different experience. I'm like, okay, I don't have to let that story play in my head anymore. I can create a new story, right? But it takes a lot of work. You're not just going to be, well, Frank said I could rewrite that and then go down this delusion path. No, it takes a lot of work. It takes digging on so many levels. It takes meditation. It takes God. If you're out there right now and you're not connecting with God, you got to figure out how to do it, right? I'm not a Bible thumper. I'm not a this thumper, but I have figured out so far in this world, the thing that connects us, the hive mind, the group conscious, the group think, there is a higher connection that connects us all, right? And if I mean, think about it. For me, it's like the sun goes up and down without my interference. So does the moon. Everything rotates. Everything does what it's supposed to do. My heart beeps without even me thinking about it. There's a divine intelligence that keeps me alive without even me trying. When I cut myself, it slowly heals. There's a divine healing process built in me. There's something looking out for me. There's something out there. There's spiritual, there's energy, there's these connection with people, right? And if you have not invited God into your life, you're doing yourself a disservice, man. The one thing that my sponsor told me is be open to all spiritual concepts, and that's in the back of the book of spiritual experiences, right? We have to get to this point where we're one thing above all that will stop us from growth is spiritual, the what was it, contempt prior to investigation. When we're dealing, and sorry, I'm paraphrasing everything off and I'm just kind of in a flow state, so sorry if I'm a little here and there, but the reality with this resilience thing is building all these strengths and flexibility and wherewithal to get yourself to a point where you can start seeing what's inside you and start changing it, right? Be able to be adaptable, adapt. When I heard it in a book, and I heard it in the big book of NA, or the basic text, and it said, and I'm paraphrasing, but it said, the pain when the pain came, shoot, I can't remember it. Basically, the pain it takes to grow to the pain it takes us to the same one will surely change, right? And that was big for me. I'm like, well, I can stay in this pain that I'm used to, or try a new pain and then eventually grow, because those growing pains hurt. It's embarrassing. There's a lot of fucking mixed emotions. You start learning stuff about you. You start feeling that hate that you've been really hating yourself for all these years. You're feeling all those emotions coming back up to surface, the things you've been getting high about all this time. And then something magical happens, especially when you have a spiritual experience and you invite God in. Um, it's a very spiritual, I call it a spiritual awakening, right? Most of us call that, but I'm going to stop rambling. So this week's weekly intention is resilience. I'm going to practice it by being able to be teachable, right? Be adaptable, change with the situation, and be mendable, right? Because I know a higher power has a plan for me, and I just got to move and flow with it, right? So this week's spiritual principle is resilience. Practice it in your life. Be adaptable. build that strength and wherewithal to know how to change with situations, right? So that's what I'm going to try to do. And if you guys want to do it alongside me, all comments, suggestions down below. Even if you disagree with me, throw it in the comments. It's no big deal, right? We got to get to the point where we can have conversations about what's right, what's wrong, and all these things, because that's where the diamonds are made, baby. Pressure, right? So if you disagree, you agree with me, jump down there and let me hear about it. I'm more than open to any suggestions and all that. Again, this is Frank with FD Recovery. This week is resilience. All right, guys. I love you. All right, peace. Thank you for tuning in to FD Recovery. A reminder, be kind to yourself on this journey of recovery. Also, call your sponsor, get connected to local support groups, and for one day at a time, stay clean and sober.